Alright, good evening. So I decided to go ahead and try and get a little something taken care of tonight as we advance in our 0-0 playthrough. My next couple weeks, in terms of work schedule and stuff like that, are pretty monstrous. So I felt like if there was going to be any opportunity to advance in the near future, I was going to have to get a little something knocked out. So, with that in mind, let's do it. We finished Chapter 5 of Season 4. So let's get started on Chapter 6, Season 4.
Commander. Keith, where are you?
And in terms of the story, Arena's dead, right?
What are you doing?
Would I... So the setup here, I think, is better than
Keith and I will tend to
the setup and execution of the commander's death in return. Would I be more forgiving of this if we hadn't already done it with the commander? Probably. Because a lot of this is done, it's done well. But, we just did this dance, relatively speaking. In terms of the entire story, the distance between the commander dying and coming back and Irene dying and coming back is really relatively short. It's separated by, 5 living world chapters and a few story instances. So if you take a step back and look at the entire Guild Wars 2 story in sheer number of chapters or story instances or whatever, that's not really that significant of a difference. So there's a tiny little line there that Timey said a minute ago, that if you really want to dig into the science of the magic in Guild Wars 2, raises some questions. So generally, one would consider the myths, and again, they're so difficult to pin down in terms of what they are or are not. But there's some relationship between the myths and Tyria. Like there's something happening there, and yet Timey just stated, and it's an important part of the story here.
It's so empty.
We have to flush Kralkatorrik out of the myths, because if he dies in the myths, then that magic is trapped in the mist and can't return to Tyria where it belongs, I guess. So
He's still bleeding badly. We almost killed him in the keep.
So then magic apparently cannot traverse between the mists and core Tyria, or not core Tyria, but the planetary Tyria, right? So what does that mean then in comparison to some of the other things that we've looked at thus far? I don't know. I don't know. That is almost certainly a script burglar. I don't remember that chest being there for any normal reason. So the script burglars kind of in core Tyria are fairly easy to take down solo. We could potentially take this one down solo as well, but we'd probably need to slightly modify our build to give us a little bit of swiftness and maybe increase our CC that we have available to be successful at that alone. Now, when the map was heavily populated, that wasn't necessarily a big deal. But now, it kind of would be a little more challenging. I don't know, we can give it a whirl, though.
Something around that wing is creating a technological dead zone. I can't get up there.
I doubt it's mechanical. I wonder if it's some sort of organic construct.
Figure it out.
Oh, there he goes.
Air support. Commander, we need.
Alright, nice, we got it.
Can you find a different way up?
That was actually a touch easier than I thought it would be. Oh, and we got an achievement for the torch, too. Okay, cool, we'll take it. I hadn't even been thinking about the achievement when we initiated that. I was just curious whether or not I could do it, to be honest. And it was the combination of... We actually didn't even end up using the swiftness. It was the combination of CC to break the bar, and then a quick DPS spike before it could start rolling again. Worked out nice. I'm pleasantly surprised. So they've introduced... This is the introduction of Skyscale. So on this account, this is the first time we have touched a Skyscale, albeit not our Skyscale.
Now you're happy.
It is, essentially what you would call a rental Skyscale, or a Skyscale that you borrow. Within the story, this is a Skyscale that is occurring naturally through, as they, as they exist in the wild, so to speak, here on this map. So they don't exist in the wild interior, though. So this is not a Tyrian creature. This is a creature that was seemingly born of the chaos associated with part of the mist being torn away and deposited in Tyrion. And Gorak, when we start doing the collection, Gorak will go into that a bit more. Or it might even be in the story that he goes into it.
Good. Kaith, you come too.
Commander, do you need your pact marshal?
Clint's army needs you. Stick with them. Commander, I'm coming.
It's settled. Let's go.
So if there's a... Well, there's not a single thing. I wouldn't limit it to just one, where I would say they kind of... oh, I'm going 100% the wrong way. Alright. There are a handful of things that they kind of got right in terms of understanding the military when they say military things or attempt to represent military things. One of the most accurate and most interesting is the role of Pact Commander and what it is and is not, or certainly what it becomes after the death of Zaitan, right? Because you could almost say that the Pact is, at a minimum, ad hoc. You might even use the term grassroots, although I don't know, that's usually associated with other type things, not military movements. A grassroots military movement is something else. There are other words for that. So, but it's an ad hoc organization, right? But after the death of Zaitan, it stops becoming an ad hoc organization. It is now, it persists. It is now an established military entity. At that point, the role of commander no longer becomes everybody follow me onto the battlefield. So it goes from, if you've studied such things, it goes from like more the insurgency model, although the Pact is hardly an insurgency, but it kind of follows that kind of model towards a state military model in which your generals do not actually take to the battlefield, or generally they do not take to the battlefield. If you're putting your generals on the battlefield in a position to die, then there's something very specific happening there. And so that thing is not happening with Logan. So whereas Traherne led the Pact as a sort of a commander, but also, let's see, do we actually... No, we don't want to... We want our mastery points. We'll apply Despair. And we'll go ahead and take the time to knock out this instance. So under Traherne, right, when it followed more of the insurgency model, you need a leader who was on the ground, actually leading from the front, and people rallied around him and he was with them on the battlefield.
A lot of lives have already been lost.
Following his death,
To make it count.
there's actually there's a period of time when we are asked if we are going to be the next Pact Commander, and we decline that invitation. And part of the way the position is packaged at that point in time by I think it's actually Almora who extends that invitation. She says the decision has been made to keep the Pact Commander out of the line of fire. It is now more of an administrative responsibility. It may still be command responsibility, but it no longer is command directly on the battlefield. And that, in theory, is part of why the commander declines that. The commander wants to be on the battlefield, right? Because this would be an immensely boring game if we just issued orders to Kaith and Ritlock and Zafira and whatever. In fact, we rarely do that even when we're located with them on the ground. So,
Still got some fight in him, though.
Logan has taken that. Logan is the guy who accepts that command from the distance, and I think they actually do a pretty good job of kind of showing that is difficult for him as someone, who was previously in the line of fire, or, was active on the ground, or however you want to phrase that. And I appreciate that, because I know a lot of folks in my own career who have made that transition, because you simply... The reality is, whether you're on the enlisted side or the commission side, at some point you are going to get promoted out of being active in the thing that you I think for most soldiers, the thing you enjoy or the thing that is your responsibility. You know, you're no longer tactical in nature. You're promoted out of that, and now you have a supervisory position or a managerial position. Um, it may seem strange for folks not in the military to hear certain positions in the military described as middle management or upper management, but that's essentially what these positions are. And that is rarely easy unless that started out as someone's goal in the first place. Making that transition is usually difficult. If it's what they aspired to all along, then getting there in the first place is usually what is difficult. Anyway, all right, there you go. You're now eligible for 3 credit hours at West Point.
He's unconscious.
If he wakes up, we're here.
Won't let that happen. Aureen, the ley lines are all yours. Work quickly.
So I definitely don't hate the ley line concept because that exists outside of Guild Wars 2 anyway. You know, that's kind of a, you know, you watch enough Ancient Aliens, get a pretty good grasp of the whole ley line thing. And I do love Ancient Aliens, by the way. That was not even a little bit tongue-in-cheek, like 100%. Cannot get enough of that show. Regardless of, you know, what within the show I subscribe to or don't subscribe to. I find it incredibly entertaining. I'm A-okay with the ley lines. I do not only A-okay, but I can appreciate it. Like I'm on board with it. It would be interesting to examine other aspects of what the ley lines are or are not. Are they the actual flow of magic? Like, so he's feeding on magic to heal. Do the ley lines flow? You know, what causes them to flow in the way they do? Because that's relatively structured, right? We know that because Scarlet showed us that you know, ley lines flowed in a certain pattern, and she was searching for that pattern as part of what she was doing, and that is again pretty consistent with, you know, the way they exist within, you know, like real mythology and stuff like that. But you know, what is the mechanism that promotes that in the first place? I guess is what I would love to see. You know, I think there's opportunity for story there, is what I'm saying. Are the ley lines a natural phenomenon, just like, you know, like magnetic poles are a natural phenomenon? Or is there, you know, are they part of, what I would really love to see is, are they part of an older magic? And we do occasionally, a couple times in the game, and even more so kind of with Guild Wars 1, have reference to older magics that precede the human gods and so forth. Even in Guild Wars 2, we have some reference to that, particularly in the Ara dungeon with the explorable modes, where we examine, you know, some of the ancient races and how they had magic that preceded the human gods. So there's tremendous opportunity there, whether it's for you know, the next expansion, the next living world, or, you know, there's an entire framework there for you know, Guild Wars 3, you know, if they chose to do that.
Tell Almora to move all armies in for the kill.
That's kind of getting way ahead of ourselves, but you know, there's room to play with that. Interestingly, and I genuinely mean this, like I always found it pretty interesting that Kralkatorrik ends up, when all is said and done, in my opinion, ends up making the most sense, you know, as an Elder Dragon, like, you know, is like the most relatable Elder Dragon, if that makes even a little bit of sense at all. You know, because his motivations aren't purely like sinister in some way, whereas you know, if Jormag represents the most aware you know, in terms of like higher thought, represents the most aware Elder Dragon, then by virtue of that, he almost certainly has to be the most sinister, because Jormag is so aware of what he's doing and so deliberate about it, manipulative about it. On the other end of that spectrum would be like Primordus, who seemingly has almost no higher thought at all. It's really all like animal instinct, seemingly. And that's even reflected in Primordus's minions, who seem to have less capability in terms of independent thought than any of the other minions. But also then can simply be viewed as an animal. Kralkatorrik strikes a really interesting middle ground where it recognizes, it has enough self-awareness to recognize why it is experiencing what it's experiencing, and why it is acting the way it's acting, but not enough to be able to control it. Okay, so that was one of the lines that was very interesting to me. So we have, "You are of me, soon I will be of you." We have, "I hope you never have to kill what you love." And then we got one more coming up that really, in convergence, left me with a lot of questions. This is not something we see with any other Elder Dragon, a heart concept. So what he just said there was mother. So, "You are of me, soon I will be of you. I hope you never have to kill what you love." And then the last thing he says is mother when killed by Irene. And at no point in the game up until this point had they established any sort of lineage among the dragons beyond Kralkatorrik, Irene, or I'm sorry, Kralkatorrik, Glint, and then Irene and Vlast. We knew of Kunavang's existence, but but Kunavang was outside of both the Elder Dragons and the Irene thing. We were unclear on that, and remain unclear on that, actually.
But I want to show
So it led me to wonder. It led me to kind of speculate. Yeah, that's not skippable. If they were going to play with some kind of cyclic thing where over eons the dragons were caught in a time loop that extended for so long and was so wide that it was irrelevant to the human race, because it spanned, you know, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. This is a pretty well done cutscene. It probably cost them a pretty penny to, you know, sell, close out season 4 with this when they weren't selling an expansion with it. Like, you know, we rolled from this into Icebreed Saga. So that's genuinely the direction I thought they were going with it, and then they didn't. End of Dragons does make it, does make those things make sense. So by no stretch of the imagination am I saying that theory that I posited at the time that I saw this is better than what they did with End of Dragons. I'm not suggesting that at all. I simply was... Timey's well animated there. I simply was dead-ass wrong in my interpretation of these things. And that is kind of an interesting dynamic of the living world and the way it folds out, is players have, you know, theories, and then they get to kind of watch things unfold. The only time that I think that takes a bad turn is when it appears that the studio actually kind of runs with player theories and writes them in, and I don't like that. Like, they should have their story outlined in entire... so we just finished End of Dragons. Let's see, Icebreed Saga was Season 5, so Season 6 will be the next Living World season. They had better have all of Season 6 already written. Or not written, but outlined. And my fear is that they do not. I've always talked about this. Like, I've always said, I don't believe they plan the story that far out. And there's been some evidence that they don't. There's been some evidence that they do. So I don't know if they do or not, to be honest, when all's said and done.
Balance of magic.
But I sure hope. There we go. Perfect. Looks wonderful. Let's wrap it up. So decided to try and get a little bit of plan in today just because I know I'm going to be real limited on time in the next 2 weeks. And actually knocked out the entirety of Chapter 6, Season 4. So we're done now with all the story that we need to do specifically for 0 to 0. What is left for us? Because we got the Ascended we need too, right? The other day we got an Ascended drop. There it is. That is absolutely enough Ascended now to fit the Agony Resistance that we want to fit for our purposes. So all we have left is Skyscale, that entire process. Gliding, advanced gliding. That chunk of that mastery line. And auto loop. That chunk, which is less than the gliding of advanced logistics there. And we'll get that through Dungeons and Fractals. So all said, like, we don't have a lot left to do to complete the 0 to 0. Maybe 10 to 15 hours of gameplay I think is probably adequate. Let's see where we're at on time. And we're at 77 hours, 29 minutes on this character. So in less than 100 hours, for sure, we are going to reach our goals. 15 more hours would put us at a little bit over 90. So I really like where we're at. I'm really pleased with the way today went because we finished that entire chapter way faster than I thought. It's probably going to be a hot minute before I'm able to do any more because of my work schedule. But when I do come back, we're going to start the Skyscale collection. We're going to work on the Return to achievements for this map, so we have the currency we need, and then we're going to start blasting through some instance content and some meta events to finish up those other 2 master tracks. So, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope everyone has a good work week, and I will catch you when I'm able to. Thank you.